Bill Dedman was looking at expensive houses he couldn't afford. The Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist enjoyed browsing real estate listings the way some people watch home renovation shows. In 2009, he found something that made him stop scrolling. Le Beau Château in New Canaan, Connecticut. 52 acres of pristine woodland, a French-style mansion, listed at $24 million. Town records showed something peculiar. The property had been vacant since 1951, 58 years. No owner had spent a single night there. Dedman kept digging. The investigation led him to two more properties. An apartment at 907 Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, 42 rooms overlooking Central Park, empty but maintained. And Bellosguardo, a 23-acre estate in Santa Barbara with a mansion the size of a small hotel, sitting vacant above the Pacific. 3 palaces, all empty, all immaculately preserved by staff who hadn't seen their employer in decades. The combined maintenance cost exceeded $50,000 per month. When Dedman finally traced the owner, he found her in a hospital room at Beth Israel Medical Center, 104 years old, living voluntarily in a simple room for 20 years while her mansions waited. She had everything. She chose nothing. This is the story of how the daughter of one of America's most ruthless tycoons built gilded cages she could never escape. Before we dive into Huguette's extraordinary life, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below, and if you're fascinated by untold stories of America's forgotten heiresses and the mansions they left behind, subscribe so you don't miss what we uncover next. Now let's begin with the man who made it all possible. William Andrews Clark arrived in the Montana Territory in 1863 with a pack on his back and the ragged clothes he wore. Born in a Pennsylvania log cabin 24 years earlier, he had taught school in Iowa, briefly fought for the Confederacy, and deserted when he realized his true calling was not warfare, but wealth. The gold fields of Bannock drew prospectors from across the country. Clark's claim paid moderately. He noticed something more valuable than the gold itself. Miners needed supplies. They needed eggs. Clark began driving mules between Salt Lake City and the Montana boomtowns, hauling basic goods over mountain passes. When a miner's monthly salary averaged $4, Clark sold eggs at $3 per dozen. The actual cost was closer to 25 cents. He made a fortune on markup before he made a fortune on metal. Banking came next. Clark moved to Deer Lodge, opened a bank, and began foreclosing on mining properties when owners defaulted on their loans. Each foreclosure placed him deeper into the mining industry. By the early 1870s, he had accumulated enough capital and enough claims to warrant serious study. He enrolled at what is now Columbia University, taking a crash course in metallurgy at the School of Mines. When he returned to Montana, he understood not just how to extract copper, but how to process it, refine it, and sell it at the moment when the world needed copper most. Edison's light bulb was coming. The electrical age required copper wire. Clark positioned himself at the center of that demand. Butte, Montana became his kingdom. Clark built smelters, bought newspapers, constructed railroads, established electric power companies. He became one of 3 copper kings, along with Marcus Daly and F. Augustus Heinze, who controlled the industry. The rivalry between Clark and Daly split the state along religious and ethnic lines. Clark, a Protestant of English heritage, faced off against Daly, an Irish Catholic immigrant. They fought over everything, where the state capital should be located, which newspapers would print which stories, who would control the legislature. Clark won the battle for Helena as capital. He wanted something more, a United States Senate seat. In 1899, Clark bought one. He distributed more than $300,000 in bribes to Montana legislators, who at that time selected senators. The bribes ranged from $240 to $100,000, delivered in envelopes, used to pay mortgages, purchase ranches, finance banks. When the scheme unraveled, the Senate Committee on Privileges and Elections investigated. 96 witnesses testified. The corruption was unanimous and undeniable. On May 15, 1900, rather than face expulsion, Clark resigned. When questioned about the bribery, he reportedly said, I never bought a man who wasn't for sale. Mark Twain, whose friend Henry Rogers competed against Clark in the copper business, wrote that Clark was as rotten a human being as can be found anywhere under the flag. He is a shame to the American nation, and no one has helped to send him to the Senate who did not know that his proper place was the penitentiary, with a ball and chain on his legs. Clark ran again. This time he won more legitimately and served a single term from 1901 to 1907. By then, his fortune rivaled John D. Rockefeller's. Estimates placed his wealth at $300 million, equivalent to 4 to 5 billion today. He had built an empire from nothing. He had survived scandal. He founded Las Vegas as a watering stop for his railroad between Salt Lake City and Los Angeles. Clark County, Nevada was named in his honor. He left Montana an environmental wreck, and its workers exploited, but he was rich, and he was about to complicate his legacy even further. Anna Eugenia LaChapelle entered the Clark household around 1893, approximately age 15. Her father had died. Clark, according to newspapers of the time, quote 2, she was born in 1878 to French-Canadian immigrant parents in Michigan. Her mother struggled to support the family. Clark's offer seemed providential. Anna became his ward. What happened next would spark decades of speculation and scandal. Clark's first wife, Catherine Louise Stauffer, had died of typhoid in 1893. They had 5 children together, 4 of whom survived to adulthood. After Catherine's death, Clark took Anna into his household. Years passed. Then, in 1904, Clark's newspaper, the Butte Miner, made an astonishing announcement. The senator had been married for years to a woman 39 years his junior, Anna LaChapelle. They already had a 2-year-old daughter named Andrée. The marriage, Clark claimed, had occurred in France in 1901 when Anna was 23 and he was 62. No marriage certificate has ever been found. The revelation stunned Montana society. Clark's political opponents seized on the ward-to-wife progression. His defenders insisted the relationship began only after Anna reached adulthood. The truth remains unclear. What is certain is that Anna, determined to escape the grinding poverty that had defined her youth, had managed a meeting with one of the richest men in America. And that meeting led to 2 daughters and a fortune that would outlast them all. On June 9, 1906, Anna gave birth to their second daughter at 6th Avenue McMahon, half a block from the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. They named her Huguette Marcelle Clark. By the time the infant crossed the Atlantic 5 years later, her father would be building the largest mansion in New York City. The mansion began with a purchase that made headlines. In 1897, William A. Clark commissioned the New York firm of Lord, Hewlett, and Hull to design a residence at the northeast corner of 77th Street and 5th Avenue. The project consumed 14 years and $7 million. Legal disputes over construction delayed completion. The final structure rose 9 stories and contained 121 rooms, 31 bathrooms, 4 art galleries, a swimming pool, a concealed garage, and a private underground rail line to bring in coal for heat. The footprint stretched 250 feet along 77th Street and 77 feet along 5th Avenue. Only the Andrew Carnegie Mansion exceeded it in size among the Gilded Age palaces facing Central Park. Clark bought a quarry in New Hampshire for $50,000. He built a railroad to transport the stone to New York. The mansion featured Victorian Turkish baths below ground level, laundry rooms on the top floor, and Greek marble columns throughout. A 4-sided tower with a 3-story high inward curving arch topped by an open pergola became visible from almost anywhere in Central Park. Critics called it excess. Montgomery Schuyler, writing an architectural record, declared it an appropriate residence for the late P.T. Barnum. The mansion earned a nickname that stuck: Clark's Folly. Young Huguette moved in around 1911, age 5. She had been living in Paris with her parents and older sister Andrée. The family split their time between Paris, New York, Santa Barbara, and Montana, traveling in private rail cars and staying in luxury hotels. The New York mansion became their primary residence. Huguette took violin lessons on a Stradivarius from age 8. Her mother Anna played harp in the galleries. The walls displayed paintings by Degas, Monet, Renoir, and J.M.W. Turner. The mansion brimmed with European art and the sound of classical music practiced by daughters who would never need to work. Huguette attended the Spence School in Manhattan. She spoke French with a slight accent, having learned it first in Paris. She was described as shy, tiny blonde with blue eyes. The newspapers tracked the Clark family's movements the way modern tabloids track celebrities. When Andrée and Huguette disembarked from steamships or stepped off private rail cars, photographers captured them. The Copper King's daughters, born to everything. It seemed permanent. It would last less than 20 years. But before the mansion fell, something else would shatter the family forever. In 1919, Andrée Clark collapsed with a fever. Within days, the diagnosis came back: spinal meningitis. She was 16 years old, 1 week away from her 17th birthday. Huguette was 13. The disease moved quickly. Andrée died surrounded by family in the New York mansion. She was buried at Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx, in the white marble mausoleum William A. Clark had built for the family. The loss devastated Huguette. She had already experienced trauma. In 1912, the sinking of the Titanic sent young Huguette into an emotional tailspin, despite the family holding unused tickets for a later voyage. In 1914, when World War I broke out, the family found themselves trapped in Paris. French banks refused to cash checks from foreigners. 8-year-old Huguette and Andrée raided their piggy banks, pooling gold coins to pay the family's fare to Le Havre. Now Andrée was gone. Huguette made a list after her sister's death. She titled it, quote, "For." The entries revealed what brought her joy: traveling away from New York by boat or train, being anywhere other than the mansion where her sister had died. William A. Clark had been surrounded by death for most of his life. 3 of his children from his first marriage had not survived to adulthood. His first wife died of typhoid. Now Andrée. He was 80 years old. His youngest daughter was learning to be self-sufficient, to keep herself company, to expect loss. Nearly a decade later, Huguette would create a memorial to her sister. She donated $50,000 to the city of Santa Barbara to excavate a saltwater marsh and create a freshwater lake. The Andrée Clark Bird Refuge, 42 acres where water birds could rest and nest. A place of life named for a girl who got none. Huguette would visit the refuge for years, watching species her sister never saw. But loss was not finished with the Clark family. 6 years after Andrée died, William A. Clark followed. March 2nd, 1925. William Andrews Clark died at age 86 in the mansion he had built to last forever. His will ordered its sale. Anna and 19-year-old Huguette faced a choice: fight to keep a palace built for a family that no longer existed, or let it go. No buyer emerged willing to maintain 121 rooms. The annual cost of heating, staffing, and preserving the structure exceeded what most Americans earned in a lifetime. 3 months after William's death, Huguette graduated from the Spence School. The timing marked an end to her childhood in every sense. Her father was gone. Her sister was gone. The mansion would soon follow. Anna and Huguette moved to 907 Fifth Avenue, a 12-story apartment building designed by J.E.R. Carpenter. Built in 1915, it featured the most expensive apartments in New York City at the time. The 12th floor, which they initially occupied, offered a full-floor unit of approximately 5,000 square feet. It was modest compared to the mansion, but it was theirs. In 1925, Clark sold the mansion to Anthony Campagna for $3 million. Campagna intended to demolish it and build a modern luxury apartment tower. The Salon Doré, one of the mansion's most ornate rooms, was salvaged and donated to the Corcoran Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. Everything else came down in 1927, less than 20 years after completion. $7 million spent, demolished for $3 million. Replaced by 960 Fifth Avenue, a luxury apartment building that still stands. The mansion that was supposed to announce the Clark family's permanence vanished before Huguette turned 21. She and Anna were alone now. A mother who had escaped poverty by becoming a Copper King's ward, a daughter who had lost her father, her sister, and the palace that had housed their memories. They had each other. They had a fortune, and within 3 years, someone would try to separate them. December 1927, the engagement announcement appeared in society pages across America. Huguette Clark, 21-year-old heiress to the copper fortune, would marry William MacDonald Gower, a Princeton graduate and law student. He was the son of William B. Gower, her late father's accountant and business associate. Gower was 21 to 23 years old, working as a clerk on Wall Street while studying law. The newspapers gushed. The New York Herald opined that no married couple ever started married life under more brilliant auspices. One could imagine the calculation: a suitable match, old family connections, Princeton education, legal career ahead, everything proper. The wedding took place on August 18, 1928 at Bellosguardo, the Clark family's estate in Santa Barbara. It should have been the beginning of a dynasty. It ended 9 months later. Huguette and Gower separated in 1929. They divorced in Reno, Nevada on August 11, 1930. Huguette cited desertion. Gower claimed the marriage had never been consummated. There was no property settlement, no alimony, no children. The society pages noted the divorce briefly and moved on. Huguette did not. During the 9 months of marriage, Anna had lived just 4 floors below on the 8th floor of 907 Fifth Avenue. Mother and daughter had never really been apart. After the divorce, Huguette returned to the 12th floor. She began using the name Mrs. Huguette Clark, keeping the married title while rejecting the marriage itself. The humiliation drove her deeper into privacy. Society columns stopped tracking her. She disappeared from parties, from benefits, from the world that had watched her since childhood. She and Anna resumed their pattern. Winters in New York, summers in Santa Barbara, minimal public interaction beyond Huguette's art lessons and occasional outings. The pattern would hold for decades. What no one outside the family understood was that Huguette had found something that wouldn't fail her, something that wouldn't die or leave, and to the California estate where she would spend her happiest years. Santa Barbara, 1923. William A. Clark purchased 23 acres on a bluff overlooking the Pacific for $300,000 from the William Miller Graham family. The property came with an Italianate villa built in 1902. The Grahams had named it Bellosguardo, beautiful lookout in Italian. The location delivered on the promise: 1,000 feet of ocean frontage, 360-degree views of the Pacific, the city, and the mountains. The original mansion suffered significant damage in the 1925 Santa Barbara earthquake. Anna saw an opportunity. The country was sliding into the Depression. Unemployment ravaged California. Anna decided to tear down the damaged Graham mansion and build something entirely her own. The project would employ dozens of workers when work was scarce. She hired Reginald Johnson, who had also designed the Santa Barbara Biltmore. The new Bellosguardo took shape between 1930 and 1933. Johnson created a French Beaux-Arts chateau in the style of an 18th-century country estate. The U-shaped structure contained 27 rooms across approximately 21,666 square feet. The formal design included a central reflecting pool flanked by 80-year-old orange trees that Anna had preserved from the original landscaping. Huguette's private wing featured an enormous painting studio with 17-foot ceilings, a loft for storing canvases, a private kitchenette, and a back stairway leading to her bedroom and sitting room. The architectural details came from Europe. 2 rooms, a reception room with exquisite paneling and a painted muslin ceiling, plus an imposing dining room, were crafted in Europe and installed from another Clark property in New York. The estate included Andrée's cottage, a rustic thatched roof structure that the Grahams had built and that the Clarks renamed in memory of their lost daughter. The carriage house held a 1933 Chrysler Royal 8 convertible and a 1933 Cadillac Vive 16 limousine. The cars would remain there for decades, preserved like everything else. Gardens, grottos, and hundreds of rose bushes filled the grounds. Anna's circular garden became a masterpiece of horticultural planning. Each rose variety was recorded, its location mapped in case anyone should want to restore it later. Huguette and Anna lived their most peaceful years at Bellosguardo. Mother and daughter painted, played music, walked the grounds. Huguette had studied painting with Tade Steica, a Polish painter in Manhattan. In 1929, she exhibited 7 paintings at the Corcoran Gallery of Art in Washington. D.C. She continued to develop her skills at Bellosguardo, spending hours in the 17-foot ceiling studio overlooking the Pacific. Anna played harp. They spoke French to each other. They had survived the Depression by creating work for others. They had survived William's death and Andrée's death by building a refuge where no one could intrude. Huguette befriended Barbara Dorn, the daughter of one of the property's caretakers. An acquaintance later recalled that while Huguette hung out with rich daredevils who drove fast cars and flew rickety planes, she and Barbara were both shy and hid in the garden. That detail captures the paradox. Huguette had access to everything. She chose hiding. The last time Huguette visited Bellosguardo was around 1953. Anna was 75. Huguette was 47. They did not know they were saying goodbye. When Anna died a decade later, Huguette would give her staff 2 instructions: keep everything in first-class condition and make no changes. For the next 60 years, Bellosguardo would wait. While Bellosguardo waited in California, the Manhattan apartment evolved into something else entirely. What began as a single 12th-floor unit became 42 rooms spanning 15,000 square feet across 3 separate co-op apartments, the entire 8th floor and half the 12th. Huguette acquired the apartment next to her mother's on the 8th floor to expand their space and ensure privacy. Later, she purchased additional units. The apartments connected via a back staircase, allowing movement between floors without using the elevator or encountering neighbors. The 12th floor featured a 30-foot library, a 40-foot drawing room, and a living room that stretched 110 feet from the fireplace to the windows overlooking Central Park. According to architectural historian Andrew Alpern, quote 8, 2 of the apartments became storage for something that increasingly consumed Huguette's attention. Dolls, October 11, 1963. Anna Evangelina LaChapelle Clark died at age 85. She was buried next to Andrée and William in the family mausoleum at Woodlawn Cemetery. Huguette had known for several years that her mother was seriously ill. The death was not unexpected. It was still wrenching. Huguette's life had always revolved around Anna. They had rarely been apart. Even during the brief 9 months when newlywed Huguette lived with William Gower, her mother had been just 4 floors away. They had lived through 2 world wars and the Depression, protected and isolated by their millions. Huguette was now 57 years old and entirely alone except for her household employees, a housekeeper, maids, a chauffeur. She decided to renovate her mother's apartment on the 8th floor. She hired Robert Samuels Jr. of French & Company, the decorating firm her mother had employed since 1926. But she insisted on one provision that revealed how far her isolation had progressed. She refused to meet with Samuels. He would orchestrate work on her apartments periodically for the next 30 years, but she would never see him face to face. His daughter, Anne Fabrizio, later recalled, "He'd tell us stories at the dinner table, how she'd hide behind a door and slip him notes." Huguette recreated her mother's Victorian bedroom at a cost of $400,000. Exact replicas of Anna's gray-painted and parcel-gilt bed upholstered in chinoiserie-patterned silk damask, a French ormolu-mounted tulip-wood dressing table with 3 folding oval mirrors, and a French bureau. Everything precisely as Anna had left it. Huguette never saw the completed room. She never moved back into the 8th floor apartments after the renovation finished. She began living in increasingly narrow parameters. If she needed money, she would fill out a check and send Adele Marier, her mother's former social secretary, to cash it at the nearest Citibank branch. If she needed groceries, her maids could pick up anything local stores would not deliver. She maintained an account at a nearby market on Lexington Avenue. If she wanted to move from her 12th floor apartment to her 8th floor apartment, she used the back stairs to avoid the elevator and her neighbors. She spoke French to her staff to ensure outsiders could not eavesdrop. One cousin in California complained frequently by phone of bronchitis and other ailments. The conversations underlined for Huguette that going out into the world meant exposure to germs and other perils. By staying away from people, she hoped she would be safe. Margaret Hogue, whose father was one of Huguette's lawyers, visited one of the apartments in the 1960s after making sure Huguette was in the other one. She lived down at the end, in the maid's quarters, Hogue recalled. They had put in a little kitchenette so she could heat up food. The heiress who owned 15,000 square feet on Fifth Avenue was living in servants' rooms. By 1988, she had stopped being seen even by the few people who might have encountered her in the building. 3 years later, she would find a simpler refuge, not another mansion, a hospital room. The dolls began arriving when Huguette was a child. French bisque from the 1860s Golden Age, Japanese hinaningyo representing emperors and court figures. By the time she died, the collection filled 2 apartments, over 1,000 pieces. Some observers called it creepy. Others understood it was her art form. Huguette collected with precision and passion. She favored dolls by Émile Jumeau, particularly the Bébé Triste models with their wistful, sad expressions. She acquired musical automatons, mechanical figures that moved and played instruments. She purchased Japanese dolls, eventually amassing approximately 600, including tiny figures of the emperor, the empress, and their ladies-in-waiting and court musicians. She commissioned Japanese miniature buildings from Saburo Kawakami, a Japanese artist who worked through the agency of G.T. Marsh, a historic Asian art importer in San Francisco and Santa Barbara. The miniatures included castles, temples, tea houses, cake shops. Huguette insisted on complete authenticity. The construction in native woods had to match real Japanese architecture. Sliding doors fit into floor and frame grooves in the exact manner of actual buildings. These miniatures attracted attention she never sought. In the 1940s, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the FBI investigated Huguette for possible Japanese sympathies. Federal agents showed up to question her about the detailed miniature Japanese structures she had commissioned from Japan. The interrogation left her deeply traumatized. The suspicion that she might be disloyal to America because she appreciated Japanese art reinforced her sense that the outside world was hostile and incomprehensible. In the late 1950s, she still ventured out occasionally. The French consul general was reviewing the guest list for a Christian Dior fashion show at the consulate in New York. He spotted a familiar name. His aunt by marriage, Huguette Clark, occupied an entire floor nearby. He told the Dior representative, Quote 12, the representative corrected him. Quote 13, Huguette attended the Dior shows. She arrived alone and barely spoke. Few people remembered her. Later, she would cable orders to Paris for scale replicas of the season's styles to be sewn for some of her 1,100 dolls. The Christian Dior atelier created custom costumes for her 19th century French babes. Nothing but the best. At age 86, Huguette paid $30,000 for a pair of French dolls. She had authorized her dealers to bid up to $135,000. She spent over $1 million with Heiress, the international doll auction firm, over 30 years. She never met anyone from the company. All correspondence went through her attorneys. Stuart Holbrook, Heiress' president, found the anonymity intriguing. For many years we had no idea who she was. She was only known as the client. The few communications that did reach them revealed her obsessive attention to detail. She once cabled a Bavarian artist who made and sold fairy tale dolls. Rumpelstiltskin house just arrived. It is beautifully painted, but unfortunately is not same size of last porridge house received. Instead of front of house being 19 3/4 of an inch wide, it is only 15 1/2 inch wide. Please make sure religious house has front of house 19 3/4 of an inch wide. The specificity was remarkable. 19 3/4. Not 19 1/2, not 20. Exact. At her death, the collection was appraised at $1.7 million. In January 2020, the Bellosguardo Foundation auctioned most of the collection at the Ritz-Carlton in Santa Barbara, raising approximately $2 million. Selected pieces were retained for display at Bellosguardo. The dolls never aged. They never asked questions. They never needed anything except to be preserved exactly as they were. Huguette had spent decades perfecting this art. She would apply the same principle to herself. March 26, 1991. Huguette Clark entered Doctors Hospital on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. She was 84 years old, weighed 75 pounds, and had cancerous lesions covering her face. The tumors, basal cell carcinomas, had gone untreated so long they made it difficult to eat or see. Doctors described her as appearing like an apparition. The hospital was not the place that a New Yorker with a life-threatening illness normally would select. Doctors' Hospital was better known as a fashionable treatment center for the well-to-do. Michael Jackson had been a patient, Marilyn Monroe, James Thurber. The 14-story brick structure on the Upper East Side, between 87th and 88th Streets by a bend in the East River, gave the impression of being an apartment building or hotel. It had a hair salon, offering private appointments in patient rooms and a comfortable dining room where patients could eat. Huguette made a quick recovery after treatment for the skin cancer and malnutrition. Her doctor, Henry Singman, strongly urged her to go home. She refused. The hospital charged $829 per day, approximately $400,000 per year. Huguette chose to stay. When Doctors Hospital later merged with Beth Israel Medical Center, she transferred. She lived the rest of her life in hospitals. Her room was simple. A private room for one patient with a hospital bed, recliner, chest of drawers, bedside table, small refrigerator, television, radio, closet, small bathroom. She liked a simple room, her nurse later testified. The room overlooked Central Park. She paid daily to maintain this view while her 42 rooms on Fifth Avenue sat empty, overlooking the same park. From day one at Doctors Hospital, Huguette had private nurses 24 hours a day. The nurse on the day shift, assigned randomly to Huguette in the spring of 1991, was Hadassah Peri. She would work for her Madame for 20 years, becoming, it seems probable, the wealthiest registered nurse in the world. Hadassah was born Gikela Tejada Oloroso in May 1950 to a politically prominent family in the Philippine fishing town of Sapian. She received a nursing degree before immigrating to the United States in 1972. She worked first at a hospital in Arkansas, then moved to New York in 1980. She married Daniel Perry, an Israeli immigrant and New York taxi driver, in 1982, converting to his Orthodox Judaism and taking the name Hadassah Peri. They had 3 children born in the 1980s. Private duty nurses are temporary workers, always hoping for a long-term assignment. Taking a day off means having a replacement nurse, one who might step into the regular role. So despite the Orthodox prohibition against working on Saturday, and despite having 3 school-age children, for many years, Hadassah worked for Huguette from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. She was paid $30 an hour, $131,040 annually. "I give my life to Madame," Hadassah said in later testimony. "For almost 14 years, I stayed more in Madame room than in my house. I work 12 hours. My kids, my husband is a mother and a father while I'm working with Madame. Family vacation, I miss." Hadassah and Huguette bonded from the beginning. Huguette was extremely frightened of new people. She refused most medical treatments unless Hadassah was there to hold her hand and talk calmingly. When hospital staff couldn't reach Hadassah, other nurses would sometimes pretend they were talking with her on the phone, telling Huguette that Hadassah said she had to eat now or allow them to check her blood pressure. Hadassah described patience as the key to her chemistry with Huguette. Quote 21. "Doctors and nurses never saw any of Huguette's family try to visit. Hadassah became her family." The gifts began in 1993 after the basement of Hadassah's home flooded. Huguette suggested the Paris move and gave her nurse $450,000. More gifts followed. By 2010, Hadassah and her family had received $31,906,074.81 in cash and property from Huguette. The gifts included a $700,000 house in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, a $500,000 home on a golf course on the Jersey Shore, 2 Manhattan condominiums for Hadassah's children to live in while attending college, a $204,000 Bentley, 20 years of college tuition and extracurricular activities for all 3 children, medical bills, taxes, and a 1686 Stradivarius violin for Hadassah's son, who had not played violin in years. Huguette gave her personal assistant Chris Sadler $500,000. She gave her best friend $10 million. She gave $25,000 to workers who repaired her television. Despite having a fortune worth more than $300 million, Huguette ran low on funds from constant gift-giving. When she needed cash, She sold assets. A 1709 Stradivarius violin called La Pucelle, an 1882 Pierre-Auguste Renoir painting entitled _22_ other artworks quietly disappeared from her Fifth Avenue apartments and reappeared at auction houses. She spent millions maintaining 3 properties she never visited while living in a hospital room and giving away her fortune to anyone who was kind to her. Doctors assessed her mental state repeatedly. In 2006, when she officially became a centenarian, a neurologist visited expecting the worst. After his tests, he described her as, quote, 23 and, quote, 24, showing no signs of mental decline. Hospital officials recalled her eccentric interests. She would often change conversational topics to cartoons such as the Smurfs and the Flintstones. She ate crackers, sardines, bananas, and ice cream. She watched television. She spoke on the phone with Hadassah every night before bed. For 20 years, the arrangement continued. Huguette paid to live in a hospital room while her mansion sat empty, maintained by staff she never saw. No family visited. No one questioned it. Until 2009, when a journalist searching real estate listings noticed something strange about a house in Connecticut that had been vacant for 58 years. Bill Dedman's discovery of Le Beau Château led to deeper investigation. The property had been purchased by Huguette in 1951 during the Cold War. Her great half-nephew later reported that family members believed she bought it sort of as a bomb shelter, a refuge in case of nuclear attack. The French-style chateau sat on 52 wooded acres, designed by Voorhees, Gemelin, and Walker. It had been built in 1937 for former U.S. Senator David A. Reed of Pennsylvania. Huguette purchased it in July 1951. She expanded it in 1952, adding an artist's loft and custom details, including a stairway with every other baluster hand-carved in the shape of a paintbrush. She never spent a single night there. Not one. The chateau contained 14,266 square feet of living space. GE appliances from the 1950s remained in their original packaging, never plugged in. A Mosler safe filled a closet. When lawyers drilled it open decades later, it contained nothing but the architectural plans for the 1952 edition. Dedman's investigation expanded to 907 Fifth Avenue. Huguette owned 3 co-op units totaling 42 rooms. She had not been seen there since 1988. The co-op fees alone cost $28,500 per month, $342,000 per year. The apartment sat empty but immaculately maintained. Finally, Dedman traced the path to Bellosguardo, 23 acres overlooking the Pacific, the 21,666 square foot mansion that Anna had built in 1933. Huguette had last visited around 1953. After Anna's death in 1963, Huguette inherited the property and gave instructions to the staff. Keep everything in first-class condition. Make no changes. The maintenance cost $40,000 per month. Staff had not seen her in decades. When Dedman arrived to tour the property with one of the caretakers, the man asked, quote 26, "Everything was preserved as if the family might return tomorrow. Furniture was custom-covered and dated by the houseman in the 1960s. Dishes were washed, covered, and dated in the 1990s. The 1933 Chrysler Royal 8 convertible and the 1933 Cadillac 516 limousine remained in the carriage house with 1949 license plates. Hundreds of rose bushes had been removed from Anna's circular garden, each variety recorded and its location mapped. A passage cut through a hedge leading to the formal gardens had been maintained. Bellosguardo remained as it was the last time Huguette saw it 60 years earlier, lovingly preserved at a cost of $40,000 per month. In February 2010, NBC News published Dedman's series. It became the most popular feature in the history of the network's news website, generating more than 110 million page views. The public could not understand. Why would someone with everything choose nothing? The stories spread worldwide. Yahoo and Google Trends showed Huguette Clark as a top search. In August 2010, the Manhattan District Attorney's Elder Abuse Unit launched an investigation into the handling of Huguette's affairs. The investigation focused on her attorney Wallace Bach, her accountant Irving Kamsler, and her nurse Hadassah Peri. Were they protecting her or exploiting her? The criminal investigation would continue for years. No charges were ever filed. Time was running out. On May 24, 2011, 2 weeks before her 105th birthday, Huguette Clark died. May 24, 2011, Beth Israel Medical Center. Hadassah Peri held her employer's hand as Huguette Clark died 2 weeks before her 105th birthday. A Catholic priest administered last rites despite Huguette's stated wishes against it. She had lived 38,013 days. For the last 7,364 of them, she had chosen a hospital room over palaces. On May 26, 2011, before the cemetery gates opened to the public, Huguette was entombed in the family mausoleum at Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx. She joined Anna, William, and Andrée, the four of them together again, the Copper King, the ward who became a wife, the daughter who died at 16, and the daughter who lived to 104 but never escaped. Two wills emerged. The first, signed in March 2005, left Huguette's entire estate to 19 distant relatives, descendants of her father's children from his first marriage. Many had never met her. Some had not seen her since 1957. 6 weeks later, in April 2005, Huguette signed a second will. This one left 75% of her estate, approximately $300 million, to charity. Nurse Hadassah Peri would receive $30 million. Goddaughter Wanda Steika would receive $12 million. The newly created Bellosguardo Foundation would get $8 million. Attorney Wallace Bach and accountant Irving Kamsler would each receive $500,000. Personal assistant Chris Sattler would receive $500,000. Property managers would receive bequests ranging from $16,800 to $253,700. Dr. Henry Singman would receive $100,000. Beth Israel Hospital, where she had lived for 2 decades, would receive $1 million. A Claude Monet painting from the Water Lilies series would go to the Corcoran Museum of Art. The 19 relatives challenged the second will. They argued that Huguette's obsession with dolls, her watching of the Smurfs and the Flintstones, her reclusiveness, and her 2 decades in a hospital proved she was incompetent. They accused Peri, Bach, and Kamsler of exerting undue influence and isolating Huguette from family. The Manhattan District Attorney's investigation intensified. Medical records and testimony painted a different picture. Multiple neurological assessments found Huguette fully competent. At age 100, a neurologist described her as cute as pie and perfectly content. She required no daily medications other than vitamins. She was remarkably healthy for her age. Testimony from those who knew her revealed a woman who knew exactly what she wanted. She gave gifts because she chose to, not because she was manipulated. She lived in the hospital because she preferred it, not because anyone forced her. The case headed toward a jury trial. On September 24, 2013, before the jury could decide, a settlement was reached. The 19 Clark relatives would receive $34.5 million to split among them. Hadassah Peri agreed to pay back $5 million to the estate and gave up her rights to the $30 million left in the will. She kept the $26 million she had received during Huguette's lifetime. Bach and Kamsler were removed as executors, received nothing, and gave up all trustee roles. The Bellosguardo Foundation would receive the property, artworks, and substantial funding. Beth Israel would keep the $1 million bequest, subject to potential clawback. The other staff members received their bequests as stated in the will. Dr. Singman received his $100,000, though he had planned to relinquish it before testifying. The settlement announced what Huguette was worth. It could not answer what she wanted. Was she a victim of manipulation, isolated by those who controlled her fortune? Or was she a woman who knew exactly what she was doing, choosing to give her wealth to those who asked for nothing except to leave her alone? The mansions she left behind would have to answer. The properties took different paths. Le Beau Château sold in 2014 to fashion designer Reed Krakoff for $14.3 million, roughly half its original asking price. Krakoff renovated the property extensively. In 2024, he listed it again for $25.5 million. It remains a private residence closed to the public. The 3 apartments at 907 Fifth Avenue sold separately in 2012 and 2013. The 8th floor west unit brought $22.5 million. The 8th floor east unit sold for $6.8 million. Combined with the 12th floor unit, the sales totaled more than $29 million. New owners moved in, no connection to the Clark family remains. Bellosguardo fought through the longest legal process. The will had specified that the property should go to a foundation devoted to fostering and promoting the arts. In 2013, the settlement established the Bellosguardo Foundation. In 2018, 7 years after Huguette's death, the property was formally transferred to the foundation. In January 2020, the foundation auctioned most of Huguette's doll collection at the Ritz-Carlton in Santa Barbara. The auction raised approximately $2 million. Selected pieces were retained for display. In 2023, 12 years after Huguette's death, Bellosguardo opened for public docent-led tours. Visitors pay $100 for 90 minutes. Tours are limited and must be booked through the foundation's website. Availability is released periodically. Those who visit see the reflecting pool with its 80-year-old orange trees. They walk through rooms where 2 rooms crafted in Europe and installed from New York, the reception room with its exquisite paneling, the dining room with its painted canvas ceiling. They see family portraits on the walls. Anna, William, Andrée, Huguette, the 4 of them preserved in oil paint, if not in life. The formal gardens remain. Andrée's cottage still stands. The Andrée Clark Bird Refuge across the street continues to provide sanctuary for water birds, funded by Huguette's donations nearly a century ago. 2 books about Huguette became bestsellers, Quote 30, by Bill Dedman and Paul Clark Newell. Junior debuted at #1 on the New York Times list in 2013. Quote 31 by Merrill Gordon followed in 2014. HBO is developing a television series, The William A. Clark Copper King Mansion in Butte. Montana operates as a bed and breakfast and museum, open to the public. Bellosguardo receives visitors now. Strangers walk through rooms where Huguette painted, where Anna played harp, where a mother and daughter tried to build a world so perfect it could never disappoint them. The estate is no longer empty, but the question remains. Who really lived in these mansions, and who was imprisoned by them? Huguette Clark was born to everything and chose nothing. Her father bought senators. Her mother bought security through marriage. Huguette bought absence. She owned 3 mansions. Bellosguardo, a shrine to the past, preserving every detail of the life she and Anna had lived. Le Beau Château, a refuge purchased but never inhabited, a shelter from threats that never materialized. 907 Fifth Avenue, a fortress against the world, 42 rooms that shrank down to servants' quarters as she retreated further into isolation. All 3 empty because she could not escape what her father built. The fortune was supposed to provide freedom. Instead, it provided isolation. William A. Clark left his daughter $300 million and no reason to engage with the world. When the world disappointed, Andrée died. Her marriage failed. The FBI accused her of disloyalty. She simply withdrew. She had the resources to never face anything uncomfortable again. The empty mansions are not monuments to wealth. They are monuments to what wealth could not buy: connection, safety, control over death. The ability to make loss stop happening. She gave Hadassah Peri $31 million over 20 years. Was it exploitation? Or was it the only real relationship Huguette had? A woman who showed up every day, held her hand during procedures, spoke calmly when she was frightened, and asked for nothing except to be allowed to care for her. The 19 relatives who challenged the will had not seen Huguette in decades. They were strangers arguing over money from a woman they had never known. Hadassah was there every day for 20 years. Perhaps the $31 million was not a theft. Perhaps it was payment for being present. Huguette lived 104 years. Her father was born in 1839. She died in 2011. 172 years of family history. She witnessed the Titanic sinking, World War I, the Depression, World War II, the Cold War, the fall of the Berlin Wall, September 11th, 2001. She held a ticket for the Titanic's second voyage. She was in New York City when the Twin Towers fell. She lived from horse carriages to smartphones. Yet her world shrank to 14 feet by 24 feet. A hospital room with a view of Central Park, the same park her father's mansion had overlooked, the same park her Fifth Avenue apartments faced. Mark Twain called William A. Clark rotten, but the Copper King left his daughter something worse than corruption. He left her so much money she never had to engage with the world, and when you never have to engage, you never learn to cope. Andrée's death became an excuse to hide. The marriage failure became a reason to isolate. The FBI investigation confirmed her suspicions. The outside world was dangerous, germy, hostile, incomprehensible. Inside the mansions, she could control everything, until even the mansions became too much. Until only a hospital room felt small enough to manage. The tragedy is not that Huguette Clark wasted her fortune or lived reclusively. The tragedy is that she inherited wealth without autonomy. Born into a fortune she did not earn. Raised in a mansion she did not choose. Surrounded by staff who became jailers and saviors simultaneously. She could buy anything. She could not buy the one thing she needed, the ability to lose something without losing everything. After Andrée died, after the mansion was demolished, after her marriage failed, Huguette learned that nothing was permanent except money. And money, it turned out, could preserve everything except life itself. The mansions still stand. Bellosguardo overlooks the Pacific, its orange trees flanking the reflecting pool, its rooms arranged exactly as Anna designed them. Visitors walk through and marvel at the preservation. They do not see the prison, they see the palace. Huguette wanted to preserve everything. William A. Clark wanted to possess everything. The mansions they built and bought remain. Some open to strangers, some hidden behind gates, all maintained as if their owners might return tomorrow. Nearly 15 years after Huguette died, Bellosguardo still gleams above the coastline, dissolving into the California light exactly as it was built to do, waiting for a daughter who will never come home.